A duke or duchess can either be a monarch ruling over a duchy or a member of the nobility, historically of highest rank below the monarch. The title comes from French duc, itself from the Latin dux, leader, a term used in Republican Rome to refer to a military commander without an official rank, and later coming to mean the leading military commander of a province. During the Middle Ages, the title signified first among the Germanic monarchies. Dukes were the rulers of the provinces and the superiors of the counts in the cities, and later, in the feudal monarchies, the highest-ranking peers of the king. A duke may or may not be, ipso facto, a member of the nation's peerage. In the United Kingdom and Spain, all dukes were also peers of the realm. In France, some were and some were not. While the term is not applicable to dukedoms of other nations, even where an institution similar to the peerage existed. During the 19th century, many of the smaller German and Italian states were ruled by dukes or grand dukes. But at present, with the exception of the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, there are no dukes ruling as monarchs. Duke remains the highest hereditary title in Portugal, Spain, and the United Kingdom. In Sweden, members of the royal family are given a personal dukedom at birth. The Pope, as a temporal sovereign, has also, though rarely, granted the title of duke or duchess to persons for services to the Holy See. In some realms, the relative status of duke and prince, as titles borne by the nobility rather than by members of reigning dynasties, varied, e.g., in Italy and the Netherlands. A woman who holds in her own right the title to such duchy or dukedom, or is the wife of a duke, is normally styled duchess. Queen Elizabeth II, however, is known by tradition as Duke of Normandy in the Channel Islands and Duke of Lancaster in Lancashire. Duchy versus dukedom. A duchy is the territory or geopolitical entity ruled by a duke. The term implies a territorial domain, within which the duke has actual subjects or significant land holdings, with respect to which the duke has or had unique legal privileges, e.g., sovereignty or manorial rights or entitlement to certain duties or income from residence, etc. A dukedom is the title or status of a duke, a rank in the present or past nobility, and is not necessarily attached to a duchy. A few examples exist today. The Grand Duchy of Luxembourg is a fully independent state, and its head, the Grand Duke, is a sovereign monarch reigning over his Luxembourgish subjects. The Duke of Cornwall holds both the dukedom and duchy, the latter being the source of his personal income. Those living on the ducal estates are subjects of the British sovereign and owe neither fealty nor services to the Duke per se. In Scotland, the male heir apparent to the British crown is always the Duke of Rothesay as well, but this is a dukedom without a duchy. Similarly, the British monarch rules and owns the Duchy of Lancaster as Duke of Lancaster, but it is held separately from the crown, with the income of the duchy estates providing the sovereign's privy purse. The Channel Islands are two of the three remaining crown dependencies, the last vestiges of the lands of the Duchy of Normandy. The islanders in their loyal toast will say, La Reine, Notre Duc. Though the title was apparently renounced under the Treaty of Paris in 1259, the Crown still maintains that the title is retained. In 1106, William's youngest son Henry I seized the Duchy of Normandy from his brother Robert. Since that time, the English sovereign has always held the title Duke of Normandy, and that by 1205, England had lost most of its French lands, including Normandy. However, the Channel Islands, part of the lost duchy, remained a self-governing possession of the English crown. While the islands today retain autonomy in government, they owe allegiance to the Queen in her role as Duke of Normandy. Middle Ages. During the Middle Ages, after Roman power in Western Europe collapsed, the title was still employed in the Germanic kingdoms, usually to refer to the rulers of old Roman provinces. Albania in 1332, Robert of Taranto succeeded his father, Philip, Robert's uncle, John, did not wish to do him homage for the Principality of Achaia, so Robert received Achaia from John in exchange for 5,000 ounces of gold and the rights to the diminished Kingdom of Albania. John took the style of Duke of Durazzo. In 1368, Durazzo fell to Carlothopia, who was recognized by Venice as Prince of Albania. Visigoths. The Visigoths retained the Roman divisions of their kingdom in the Iberian Peninsula, and it seems that dukes ruled over these areas. They were the most powerful landowners and, along with the bishops, elected the king, usually from their own midst. They were the military commanders and in this capacity often acted independently from the king, most notably in the latter period before the Muslim invasions. The army was structured decimally, with the highest unit, the Thilufa, probably corresponding to about 1,000 people from each civitas. The cities were commanded by counts, who were in turn answerable to the dukes, who called up the Tirfi when necessary. Lombards. When the Lombards entered Italy, the Latin chroniclers called their war leaders duces in the old fashion. These leaders eventually became the provincial rulers, each with a recognized seat of government. Though nominally loyal to the king, the concept of kingship was new to the Lombards, and the dukes were highly independent, especially in central and southern Italy, where the Duke of Spoleto and the Duke of Benevento were de facto sovereigns. In 575, when Clef died, a period known as the Rule of the Dukes, in which the dukes governed without a king, commenced. It lasted only a decade before the disunited magnates, in order to defend the kingdom from external attacks, elected a new king and even diminished their own duchies to provide him with a handsome royal domain. The Lombard kings were usually drawn from the duke pool when the title was not hereditary. The dukes tried to make their own offices hereditary. Beneath them in the internal structure were the counts and gastalds, a uniquely Lombard title initially referring to judicial functions. Similar to accounts, in provincial regions the Franks employed dukes as the governors of Roman provinces, though they also led military expeditions far from their duchies. The dukes were the highest-ranking officials in the realm, typically Frankish, and formed the class from which the king's generals were chosen in times of war. The dukes met with the king every May to discuss policy for the upcoming year, the so-called Mayfield. In Burgundy and Provence, the titles of patrician and prefect were commonly employed instead of duke, probably for historical reasons relating to the greater Romanization of those provinces. But the titles were basically equivalent. In late Merovingian Gaul, the mayors of the palace of the Arnulfing clan began to use the title Dux a Princeps Francorum, Duke and Prince of the Franks. In this title, Duke implied supreme military control of the entire nation, and it was thus used until the end of the Carolingian dynasty in France in 987. Holy Roman Empire stem duchies. England. Anglo-Saxon times. The highest political division beneath that of kingdom among the Anglo-Saxons was the ealdormanrian, while the title ealdorman was replaced by the Danish eorl over time. The first ealdormen were referred to as duces in the chronicles. So in Anglo-Saxon England, where the Roman political divisions were largely abandoned, the grade of duke was retained as supreme landlord after the king. But after the Norman conquest, their power and regional jurisdiction was limited to that of the Norman counts. Late medieval times. Edward III of England created the first 3 English dukedoms by naming his eldest son Edward, the Black Prince, as Duke of Cornwall in 1337. Upon the death of the Black Prince, the Duchy of Cornwall passed to his 9-year-old son, who would eventually succeed his grandfather as Richard II. The Duchy of Lancaster was created by Edward III in 1351 for Henry of Grosmont, but became extinct upon the Duke's death in 1361. The following year, Edward III bestowed the title on his 4th son, John of Gaunt, who was also married to the first Duke's daughter. On the same day, Edward III also created his 2nd son, Lionel of Antwerp, as Duke of Clarence. All 5 of Edward III's surviving sons eventually became dukes. In 1385, 10 years after their father's death, his heir Richard II created dukedoms for his last 2 uncles on the same day. Thomas of Woodstock was named Duke of Gloucester and Edmund of Langley became Duke of York, thereby founding the House of York, which later fought for the throne with John of Gaunt's Lancastrian descendants during the Wars of the Roses. By 1483, a total of 16 ducal titles had been created: Cornwall, Lancaster, Clarence, Gloucester, York, Ireland, Hereford, Aumale, Exeter, Surrey, Norfolk, Bedford, Somerset, Buckingham, Warwick and Suffolk. Some became extinct, others had multiple creations, and some had merged with the crown upon the holder's accession to the throne. When the Plantagenet dynasty came to an end at the Battle of Bosworth Field on the 22nd of August 1485, only 4 ducal titles remained extant, of which 2 were now permanently associated with the crown. John de la Pole was Duke of Suffolk and John Howard was Duke of Norfolk, while the Duchy of Cornwall was reserved as a title and source of income for the eldest son of the sovereign, and the Duchy of Lancaster was now held by the monarch. Norfolk perished alongside Richard III at Bosworth Field, and the title was forfeit. It was restored to his son Thomas 30 years later by Henry VIII. As one of a number of dukes created or recreated by the Tudor dynasty over the ensuing century. England's premier ducal title, Norfolk, remains in the Howard family to this day. The modern age. In the 19th century, the sovereign dukes of Parma and Modena in Italy, and of Anhalt, Brunswick-Lüneburg, Nassau, Saxe-Coburg, Gotha, Saxe-Meiningen and Saxe-Altenburg in Germany survived Napoleon's reorganization. Since the unification of Italy in 1870 and the end of monarchy in Germany in 1918, there have no longer been any reigning dukes in Europe. Luxembourg is ruled by a Grand Duke, a higher title, just below king. In the United Kingdom, the inherited position of a duke along with its dignities, privileges, and rights is a dukedom. However, the title of duke has never been associated with independent rule in the British Isles. They hold dukedoms, not duchies. Dukes in the United Kingdom are addressed as Your Grace, and referred to as His Grace. Currently, there are 27 dukedoms in the Peerage of England, Peerage of Scotland, Peerage of Great Britain, Peerage of Ireland and Peerage of the United Kingdom, held by 24 different people. Equivalents in other European languages. CWIKT-N, Duke for equivalents in other European languages. Royal Dukes. Various royal houses traditionally awarded dukedoms to the sons and in some cases, the daughters, of their respective sovereigns. Others include at least one dukedom in a wider list of similarly granted titles. Nominal dukedoms without any actual authority, often even without an estate. Such titles are still conferred on royal princes or princesses in the current European monarchies of Belgium, Spain, Sweden and the United Kingdom. Other historical cases occurred, for example, in Denmark, Finland and France, Portugal and some former colonial possessions such as Brazil and Haiti. United Kingdom. In the United Kingdom, ducal titles which have been given within the royal family include Duke of Cornwall, Duke of Lancaster, Duke of Clarence, Duke of York, Duke of Gloucester, Duke of Bedford, Duke of Cumberland, Duke of Cambridge, Duke of Rothesay, Duke of Albany, Duke of Ross, Duke of Edinburgh, Duke of Kent, Duke of Sussex, and Duke of Connaught and Strathearn. Following his abdication in 1936, the former King Edward VIII was given the title Duke of Windsor. List of dukes in the Peerage of the United Kingdom. List of dukes in the peerages of the British Isles. Belgium. In Belgium, the title of Duke of Brabant, if still vacant, has been awarded preferentially to the eldest son and heir apparent of the king. Other male dynasts receiving various lower historical titles, such as Count of Flanders and Prince of Liege. Denmark. Denmark's kings gave appanages in their twin duchies of Schleswig-Holstein to younger sons and or their male line descendants. with a specific though not sovereign title of duke, e.g., Duke of Gottorp, Duke of Sonderburg, Duke of Augustenburg, Duke of Franzingen, Duke of Beck, Duke of Glücksburg and Duke of Norberg. Iberian Peninsula. When the Christian reconquista, sweeping the Moors from the former Caliphate of Córdoba and its Taifa remnants, transformed the territory of former Suevic and Visigothic realms into Catholic feudal principalities, none of these warlords was exactly styled duke. A few started as count, but soon all politically relevant princes were to use the royal style of king. Portugal. In Portugal, the title of duke was granted for the first time in 1415 to Infante Peter and Infante Henry, the second and third sons of King John I, following their participation in the successful conquest of Ceuta. Pedro became the first Duke of Coimbra and Henry I, Duke of Izu. From the reign of King Manuel I, the title of Duke of Bejar was given to the second son of the monarch. This was changed during the liberal regime in the 19th century, when the first Infante got the title of Duke of Porto and the second Infante was known as Duke of Bejar. There are examples of Duke as a subsidiary title, granted to the most powerful noble houses. Duke of Barcelos, to be used by the heir of the Duke of Braganza. Duke of Torres Novas, to be used by the heir of the Duke of Aveiro. Duke of Miranda do Corvo, to be used by the heir of the Duke of Lafos. Usually, the title of duke was granted to relatives of the royal family, such as the infantus or natural sons of the monarch. There are exceptions, such as Antonio José de Avila, who, although not having any relation to the royal family, was given the title of Duke of Avila and Bolama in the 19th century. Spain. Spanish infantas and infantas were usually given a dukedom upon marriage, excepting the heir apparent, who is the Prince of Asturias. This title is nowadays not hereditary, but carries a Grande de España. The current royal duchesses are HRH the Duchess of Badajoz, HRH the Duchess of Soria, HRH the Duchess of Lugo and HRH the Duchess of Palma de Mallorca. In Spain all the dukes hold the court rank of Grande, i.e., Grande of the realm, which had precedence over all other feudatories. Nordic countries. The northern European duchies of Halland, Jutland, Lolland, Oslier and Revel existed in the Middle Ages. The longest surviving duchy was Schleswig, i.e., Sonderjylland. Its southern neighbour, the Duchy of Holstein, in personal union with the Danish crown, was nonetheless always a German principality. The two duchies jointly became a member of the German Bundesländers, Schleswig-Holstein, in the 19th century. In Sweden, medieval duchies of Finland, Södermanland, Skåne, and Halland were some appanages for princes of the reigning dynasty. In modern times almost every province in Sweden was used as the territorial designation for a royal prince's dukedom. Sweden had a history of making the sons of its kings ruling princes of vast duchies, but this ceased in 1622. Only one non-royal person was ever given a dukedom, title-wise. However, all Swedish princes since 1772, and princesses since 1980, are given a dukedom for life. Currently, there are 2 dukes and 4 duchesses. The territorial designations of these dukedoms refer to 6 of the provinces of Sweden. Key parts of Finland were sometimes under a Duke of Finland during the Swedish reign. Some of the provinces are still considered duchies for the purposes of heraldry. France and other former monarchies. See appanage and the list in the geographical section below, which also treats special ducal titles in orders or national significance.